Start with a chant.
Happy birthday.
Happy Jayanti, Orinada.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Jayanti's coming up.
Happy Jayanti.
Happy Jayanti, Satguru.
Happy Satguru.
Happy Jayanti, Satguru.
Thank you.
Happy Jayanti.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Going to begin by sharing screen. Very good, and you should see a slide which says our daily modes of consciousness. Do you see that, Dushantan?
Yes, Sadhguru.
Okay, so we're in good shape here. And this is a publisher's desk in the January, February, March 2021 issue of Hinduism Today. So the 2021 January issue is what's being produced this month. We produce it in October. It goes to press in November, and then individuals start receiving it in late November and December. So this is hot off the press, so to speak. And just the keynote was just created a couple of days ago. And we'll see what happens here. The popular view of Hinduism describes a religion centered around ceremonies drawn from the ancient Vedas and Agamas, rites meant to invoke the presence of divinity through different deities. Excuse me 1 second here. Supposed to close a window. Here we go. That description, however, leaves out Hinduism's deeper teachings, such as its ancient insights regarding the mind's 4 states of consciousness. Oh, this is very important, particularly in dealing with younger Hindus. Many younger Hindus have an aversion toward deity worship, toward temple worship, and therefore, if that's the totality of Hinduism, they have an aversion to Hinduism. So it's very important they understand the other aspects of Hinduism, and this is certainly an important other aspect. The idea that Hinduism is talking about the mind, understanding the mind, controlling the mind, raising consciousness, all of that is an important part of Hinduism. The oldest writing that contains the states of mind is the Chandogya Upanishad, variously dated around the 8th to 6th century BCE. Most will be amazed that over 2,500 years ago, India's rishis were revealing insights on the states of consciousness experienced by human beings. The same ideas are expanded on in 12 verses of the Mandukya Upanishad, dated around 7 centuries later. So this is kind of amazing that 2,500 years ago, Hinduism is talking about the mind in a very precise way. How many other religions were thinking about the mind 2,500 years ago and describing it so accurately? Good question. These 4 modes of mind, called avastha in Sanskrit, are Jagrat, or Vaishvanara, wakefulness, Swapna, or Taijasa, dreaming, Sushupti, or Prajna, deep sleep, and Turiya, the 4th, superconsciousness, or Samadhi. A Wikipedia contributor makes this comment on these teachings from the Upanishads. Distinctions and types of awareness appear in the ancient thought of India, influenced by Hinduism. A central idea of the Upanishads is the distinction between a person's transient mundane self and their eternal unchanging soul. Beautifully said. Divergent Hindu doctrines and Buddhism have challenged this hierarchy of selves, but have all emphasized the importance of reaching higher awareness. So we'll come back to that as our last point, the idea of reaching higher awareness. How do we do that? Yoga is a range of techniques used in pursuit of this goal. Nicely said. Let's look at each of these 4 states in more detail. Wakefulness. In the waking state, the Atman or soul has a limited sense of self and is conscious of and experiences external objects. Very simple. Dreaming. In the dreaming state, the Atman has the same limited sense of self while being conscious of and experiencing his mental landscape and the astral world. So 2 things there. His mental landscape means images created just by his mind, which generally relates to the recent past, what you saw on television last night, and events during the day, particularly if there was an emotional content. That's the mental landscape that we experience in dreaming, and the astral world, so we can actually see other beings that don't have anything to do with our mental landscape. If we're deep in the astral world, we encounter other people who are in their astral bodies. So 2 things there. Deep sleep. In dreamless sleep, awareness objects is absent. Some of the limited self-sense is overcome and a deeper peace is experienced. So we're going deeper. We've overcome some of the limited self-sense and we have more peace of mind. A little bit deeper. Superconsciousness. In the 4th state, the Atman abides in its full spiritual nature. Then the individual is omnipresent, without any sense of something existing apart from him. We can think of this as living in a house with 3 rooms, 1 for wakefulness, 1 for dreaming, and a 3rd for deep sleep. As long as we remain in the house, our consciousness is limited. However, if we step outside, we can remove this limitation and experience ourselves as omnipresent consciousness. The first 2 verses of Mandukya Upanishad, translated by Swami Nikhilananda, present this idea of oneness in terms of Atma, Brahman, and Om. So we get 3 terms there. Verse 1. Om, the word, is all this, i.e. the whole world. Clear explanation of it is as follows. All that is past, present, and future is indeed Om. And whatever else there is beyond the threefold division of time, that also is truly Om. Verse 2. All this is indeed Brahman. This Atman is Brahman. This same Atman has 4 quarters. So that's referring to the 4 modes of consciousness. The statement, this Atman is Brahman, in Sanskrit is I am Atma Brahma, and is one of the 4 Mahavakya, or 4 great statements of the Upanishads declaring the oneness of Atman and Brahman. The Mundaka Upanishad, which is a different one, states that Om can be used as a means of realizing this oneness. Om is the bow, the Atman is the arrow, Brahman is said to be the mark. It is to be struck by an undistracted mind. Then the Atman becomes one with Brahman, as the arrow with the target. Certainly one way of utilizing Om as a bow is through its repetition as a mantra, a practice of japa yoga. Gurudeva explains this practice in the Cognizant Ability resource section of his book, Merging with Shiva. So we're going to be very daring and jump into cognizant ability, which is a bit hard to understand. The 70th aphorism. To aid in the depolarization and transmutation of creative forces, certain mantras are chanted. These logically concentrate the conscious mind. Harmonize its subconscious and magnetize the brain. This draws the creative forces from the instinctive to the intellectual and superconscious regions. In other words, chanting mantras is a way of raising our consciousness. 71st aphorism. The letters A-U-M, when correctly chanted, transmute the instinctive to the intellectual and the instinctive intellectual to the superconscious. Direct cognition will then be attained. Gurudeva comments on this aphorism. Om is the universal mantra which can be performed safely by the initiated and the uninitiated alike, under any condition, in any circumstance, whether the body is clean or dirty. It will heighten consciousness by harmonizing the physical with the mental and spiritual when chanted correctly. So we got to chant it correctly. Gurudeva explained that for the repetition of Om as a mantra to be effective, the mantra must be pronounced correctly. The first syllable is A, pronounced as the English word ah, but prolonged, ah. The second syllable is U, as in roof, pronounced oo, but prolonged, oo. The third syllable is M, pronounced with the front teeth gently touching and the sound prolonged, Each repetition is sounded for about 7 seconds, with 2 seconds on ah, 2 seconds on oo, and 3 seconds on with a silence of about 2 seconds before the next repetition. So that takes 7 seconds to chant, and 2 seconds silence before you chant it again. So I'll wait till the end. You can count my chant at the end, see if I get my 2, 2, 3 correct. I always try and chant it like that. On the first syllable, ah, we feel the solar plexus and chest vibrating. On the second syllable, oo, the throat vibrates. The third syllable, vibrates the top of the head. The Mandukya Upanishad, verses 9 to 12, draws a clear correlation between the quarters of Om and the 4 modes of consciousness, supporting my Guru's idea of using the parts of Om to move to more subtle levels of being. Vaishvanara Atman, whose sphere of activity is the waking state, is A, the first letter of Om, on account of his all-pervasiveness or on account of his being the first. He who knows this obtains all desires and becomes first among the great. Taijasa Atman, whose sphere of activity is the dream state, is U, the second letter of Om, on account of his superiority or intermediateness. He who knows this attains a superior knowledge, receives equal treatment from all, and finds in his family no one ignorant of Brahman. Prajna Atman, whose sphere is deep sleep, is the third letter of Om, because both are the measure and also because in them all become one. He who knows this is able to measure all and also comprehends all within himself. The fourth, Turiya, is without parts and without relationship. It is the cessation of phenomena. It is all good and non-dual. This Om is verily Atman. He who knows this merges his self and Atman. Yes, he who knows this. So without parts means without sound, or Om as the soundless sound. In other words, if you're listening to the Om, not chanting it, but if you're listening to the Om in meditation, it's a sound. But if you listen to it and go further within, it becomes soundless. It's just a motion. Soundless sound is one of the words in the Shumche dictionary. Sound just becomes a motion. So it's soundless sound is a motion without being able to hear anything. In cognizant ability, when Gurudeva mentions moving from the instinctive to the intellectual mind, he is speaking of raising our state of consciousness. For example, fear is a negative emotion that we can rise above through a few minutes of chanting Om. We can move from an agitated state of mind to a peaceful one in the same way. Anger can be transmuted into forgiveness as well, all through the power of Om. If an individual is in a negative state of consciousness, he can move to a positive one. Chanting the mantra Om is only one of many practices that Hinduism gives us for accomplishing this. Gurudeva points out elsewhere in Merging with Shiva, generally people take problems too personally by identifying closely with them. When they experience anger, they are angry. When they experience bliss, they are blissful. The mystic identifies with the experiencer instead of the experience. He sees himself as pure awareness that travels in the mind. When he is in San Francisco, he is not San Francisco. Similarly, when he is in anger, he is not anger. He says to himself, I am pure energy. I am the spiritual energy that floods through mind and body. I am not the body, the mind, or the emotions. I am not the thoughts I think or the experiences I experience. Thus he molds a new identity of himself as a free being who can travel anywhere in the mind. Such a person is always at the top of the mountain. We have to examine this concept of who we are. When we begin to totally feel all right about ourselves, the meaning of the word I begins to change. I no longer means the body of us. I means energy, awareness, and willpower. Soon we gain the total truth that we are living in the body, but we are not the body we live in. Examine the word I and honestly see what it means to you. Oh, that's the end of the publisher's desk. I have a couple of add-ons just for this presentation. We have two additional aphorisms that are sequential to the ones we just read. The 72nd aphorism. The Om harmonizes the physical body with the mind and the mind with the intuitive nature. Here again we can see the great benefits of the mantra Om. It in itself is the ultimate psychiatrist, meaning our intuitive nature can solve our external nature problems. That's what it's saying. It in itself is the sound of the universe, the sound of a city in action, the sound at birth, the sound at death. Listen to the sounds any place, anywhere, blended together, and you will hear the Om. That's what we mentioned before. It's all the sounds blended. While listening, mentally say the sound Om and feel body, mind, and the godness within you blending as one. It's a nice practice. 73rd aphorism. I get asked this question sometimes. Why do we say Om first? Say Om before chants. Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya. Om Namaste, we're constantly adding an Om at the beginning of something. Why do we do that? So this aphorism answers that question quite nicely. The Om placed before or after a word adds power and concentrated forces to the word. Read that again. The Om placed before or after a word adds power and concentrated forces to the word. When you are encouraging someone and are saying those encouraging, uplifting words, think Om. The vibration that you will create by doing this within yourself goes to him, adds power to your words, and uplifts him as it is uplifting you. The vibration that you will create by doing this within yourself goes to him, adds power to your words, and uplifts him as it uplifts you. Okay? So repetition there. Final idea. This was quotes and quips. Quote. Sometimes the monks who edit Hinduism today use one of my quotes, not all the time, in the quotes and quips. 20-some quotes and quips are there, every issue. So this was in the October 2014 edition. Hinduism is focused on the present moment. It's not focused on what happens after we die. It's not focused on some future event. It's not focused on tomorrow. It's not focused on later today. It's focused on living in as high a state of consciousness as possible right now. So this is an important point, in that many religions are focused on the future. After death, you're going to go to heaven or go to hell. That's a future event, and you're crossing your fingers that it'll happen if you're in that religion. So some Hindu teachings talk about it as well, because we do go to certain places, but that's not the main focus. We're not focused on the future in Hinduism. We're focused on the present moment, and we're trying to live, what's it say precisely? We're living in as high a state of consciousness as possible right now. I'm going to stop sharing since I'm talking mainly. So what does that mean? Well, it doesn't say we're living in the highest state of consciousness right now. It doesn't say that, which you might have kind of heard that, because that's the default teaching. What this is saying, we're living in as high a state of consciousness as possible right now. Consciousness is gradational. Some of you will remember the Publisher's Desk, which talks about a gradational states of consciousness. So the first ones are negative, then they're positive, then they're creative, then they're divine, and then they're unitive. So we'll explain those levels. So if you're usually experiencing negative states of consciousness, we have anger and we have fear. So anger is a lower state of consciousness than fear. So if we're angry all the time and we can move up into being fearful all the time, that's a higher state of consciousness. Not where we want to stop, certainly, but you get the idea. We're not talking about being omnipresent here. We're just talking about moving up the ladder of consciousness rung by rung, based on where we were last year. We want to be on a higher rung. So we move from anger up to fear, and then from fear into positiveness, which is the realm of the Muladhara chakra and Lord Ganesha. So we want to be a positive person and not a negative one. What's after positivity? Creativity. We're able to bring through new ideas in our profession, insights into the scientific world, insights into the artistic world, music, whatever it is, we're able to be creative, bring through something new. So that's a higher vibration than just being positive. Then above that is divinity. We are aware of the divineness within us. We're aware of our soul nature, which is a higher vibration than being creative and not aware of our soul nature. Then if we go deeply enough into our soul nature, we have the only unity of experience there is, which is we're omnipresent consciousness. So God Shiva's omnipresent consciousness, we're omnipresent consciousness. So that aspect of our soul and that aspect of God Shiva are identical. So it's a non-dual experience. So that's the highest state of consciousness. And it's a very important point. It doesn't mean we try for it just when we're meditating in the morning or when we're at the temple. This idea is in the now. So the day is just a series of nows. So it basically means all day long. Every day, we're trying to live in as high a state of consciousness as possible. That's a wonderful interpretation of Hinduism on a practical consciousness-based approach. So now you can count my Om. See if I do it right. 2, 2, 3. Om. Have a wonderful rest of the day.